Yo, what is up gamers, it's Sebastian here, coming to a new video, and apparently I'm becoming Yu-Gi-Oh's biggest contrarian, and so to continue that sort of trend, I'll be discussing Crossout Desginator and why it is an overhyped card. Now, I know a lot of people disagree, they're gonna be boom, telling me that Crossout Desginator is very powerful, it's very broken, it's incredibly toxic. Sure, I agree, Crossout Desginator is a very good card, I think that card's quite powerful. However, and that's the most heavy however you ever hear, even from the progression series, this however is putting a lot of work. However, Crossout Desginator is overhyped, and let me explain why. So as we can see from these sort of videos that the sort of general community is putting out about how we're doomed, there's all these Crossout doom posting videos. We're doomed, it's going to be in everything. It's the staple that will change everything. This card will change Yu-Gi-Oh forever. Like, all these sort of videos, they're just blatantly incorrect, okay? And a lot of it is just they fail to take into account sort of the context of Crossout in the OCG. And so when they look at OCG lists, they look at them outside of the context that they're in. And then they decide, oh, it's in every OCG list, which, by the way, isn't even true. Then it must be going to be in every TCG list. And, you know, when did we have something like this before? When was there a card that was in every OCG list, but because of the OCG community and not, like, because the OCG, like, environment and not because of how good it is? What was it? Dragoon? Yeah, that was another card that a lot of people really doom posted about that I said was trash, and I was right. Anyways, so about Crossout, the reason why Crossout is in a lot of decks in the OCG is because the decks in the OCG are already built, they were already built to support Crossout. And what I mean is that because they have Mat C in the OCG, they're forced to play a lot of defensive cards. It's why Dragoon was really strong in the OCG, because Dragoon traded I wouldn't say it traded positively, but it traded like neutrally into Mat C, and it was like a very strong contingency if you got Mat Seed. But outside of Mat C, it wasn't really that good. And Crossout is sort of Crossout is like not similar, because Crossout is like good still even without Mat C. But you have to consider, like, because of how decks are built in the OCG, Crossout just naturally supports that. With Mat C, it forces a lot more defensive cards to end up being played, so that if you do have to pass turn due to you being Mat C'd, you don't immediately die. And so because you're already playing all these defensive cards in your combo decks, that means it just becomes a matter of trying to fit in free Crossout. In the TCG, you don't have to try to play all these defensive cards in your combo decks, because that's just unnecessary. You're fine, you're not going to get Mat C'd, and so you'd rather just play more extenders, because extenders are naturally better at playing through hand traps, and they're naturally better at playing through boards. And so when you're playing more extenders, a card like Crossout doesn't actually do anything because you're not playing the hand traps. And so in order to fit Crossout in the combo decks in the TCG, you'll have to end up cutting so many extenders to not just fit the Crossout, but to also fit the hand traps. And that's like where the issue of Crossout like begins, being that like in the TCG, our combo decks, most of them will not be playing Crossout. Obviously we're going to get combo decks like Dragon Link at the moment, that's like more mid-range, but people call it a combo deck. That will naturally play, that will probably be suited to play Crossout, I'm not too sure. But like you see a deck like Drytron, you see a deck like when we had 2020 format, the Spiral deck wouldn't have played Crossout. The Dragon Link deck in 2020 wouldn't play Crossout, neither would have the Infernoble deck. Eldritch Synchron wouldn't play Crossout, although that was more of a control deck. Which, by the way, control decks, another type of deck that wouldn't play Crossout. Even in the OCG, control decks do not play Crossout. You look at any of the Eldritch lists, they don't play Crossout. And if you look in the TCG, what sort of control decks we have like Altergeist, we have Eldritch. These decks aren't going to play Crossout, because why the hell do they care about these like hand traps? And you're not going to try to argue that they're going to side in one Lightning Storm and Crossout. No, that's not a natural thing that's happening. And so when we like the issue is that people see decks like this in the OCG and they think this is because of Crossout, when actually it's because of Matsi. And this is where, like, I think the card is overhyped. Like, sure, okay, a deck like Sword Sword would play Crossout probably in the TCG, yeah, sure, but that's because the mid-range deck playing all these hand traps anyways. But let's look at even a combo deck in the OCG, right? Here's a Drytron deck that went I don't know if it went undefeated, but it got first place at a relatively big Chinese event. Crossout where, like, literally doesn't even play Crossout anywhere, right? Like, if a deck like this, if a combo deck like this can see success in the OCG without Crossout, then naturally it begins to, it starts the argument of, should we be playing Crossout in every single deck, or is there more thought to it? And the answer is that there's more thought to it. It's not just going to be a case of just slapping it in every deck. As I've said already, combo decks just would rather play more extenders in the TCG, at least unless Matsi gets banned. If Matsi gets banned, everything changes, sure. But as it stands right now, Crossout would not be played in most combo decks. Same with control decks, and not even every mid-range deck is going to play Crossout. Here's a Salamangreat list from around the time Crossout came out. As you can see in the Salamangreat list, literally the only Crossout is in the side deck. In the main deck, there's like 3 copies of Callby, so you could argue that they would be playing Crossout because we have 1 Callby. But you have decks, you had Salamangreat decks in the OCG that literally just played 20 traps and 0 Crossout, and that was like also out around the same time. And so even in every mid-range deck, which is the best like archetype of deck to get supported by Crossout, even in every mid-range deck, you're not seeing Crossout. And we have certain formats as well where hand traps aren't even necessarily correct. Like when we had Peak Virtual World format, during Peak Virtual World formats, just traps were better against VFD, unless you're playing a deck like Virtual World in which you would run hand traps naturally. But like trap decks were really favored in the Virtual World format because they were good into VFD. We have Dragon Link format where board breakers were better than hand traps into Dragon Link, but also we had decks where just pure engine could beat Dragon Link, such as Shadows doing that format. And so it's not just a question of every mid-range deck is going to be playing Crossout in every format. That's not even true. Like we will see mid-range decks not playing Crossout in certain formats. And so all this video is to really say is that you should put in a lot more thought behind Crossout rather than just going with the popular opinion that it's going to be in every deck. Because if you say it's going to be in every deck, that's just an incredibly ignorant and blatantly incorrect statement to make. And that's pretty much all I have to say. Just think more about Crossout before you say it's going to ruin the game, because actually there's a lot more depth to Crossout than people give it credit for. But that's going to be it for this video. I'll see you gamers later, and goodbye.